The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Emily Landis. I am a sales consultant with CU Solutions Group, and I will be your host today. We'll probably have some people still be joining us because we're just at 2 o'clock here. But because we have so many credit unions joining us today, everyone will be on mute. For those of you that are familiar with us and those that aren't, we are the QSO of the Michigan Credit Union League. So our mission really is to help serve credit unions, help them grow and help them remain strong, which I think is more important now than ever. And so we encourage you to use the chat feature today because everyone is on mute. My colleague Isaac, who is the Senior Director of Growth and Strategy at CU Solutions Group, will be handling that chat. So while he's not sharing his camera today, you may hear him chime in. If you hear a floating voice, that is Isaac posing some of your questions to us that you give us throughout the chat. So thank you for using that chat. We will be hosting a Q&A session at the end of our panel discussion to address some of those questions, and again throughout here. But we really do want to understand what you guys are struggling with so that we can help better serve you during this time. So we really encourage you to use that chat function. We want to see if we can help you with any additional resources that we may have free through our organization, or if we can put you in contact with some other resources. So again, please use that chat feature throughout today. But I'd like to introduce you to the two other panelists that I have on the line. First, we have Amanda Kotsilidis. She has 20 years of HR experience, with the first half really being in recruitment and training and development. And then the second half is all disciplines of HR as an HR director. So currently, Amanda is our Chief Culture Officer at MCUL, our parent company, where she is responsible for the cultural development as well as all human resource functions. She's worked in nonprofit, healthcare, automotive manufacturing, logistics, and financial industries, of course, as well. The second panelist that we have today is Eric Schornhorst. He is a strategic advisor with CUSG. He helps credit unions with their strategic planning and governance, as well as helping support our company's CU review product that we have. Prior to joining us at CUSG, Eric was a CFO at multiple credit unions for 15 years, including during the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis. So thank you guys both for joining us today.
Good afternoon.
Hi. And I see my chat flashing real quick, so it's just Isaac talking to everyone. So I just want to make sure when I see that flashing, make sure I'm handling those different questions that do pop up. So the reason really that we wanted to host this webinar today is to, in this ever-changing new environment that we're at, there's lots of unknowns out there. So we wanted to pool our resources, help provide best practices, and try to address some of the major concerns that you guys are having. One of those huge unknowns that we have is the new legislation that's taking part in place on a weekly, if not daily basis. Amanda, I'll pose this first question to you. What are some good ways, or how are you staying up to date with that changing legislation and the impacts that it has on our employees or on your employees?
That's a great question. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today, and thanks for hosting, of course, Emily. This is definitely an unprecedented time, as we all know, in our nation and world. As an HR practitioner, I've got, it's crazy to think, 20 years of experience. Never have I seen something as fast moving and changing as the environment we're in today. And what I am doing, I've got a staff of 2 people that work with me, and the 3 of us are all focused on specific things, but how we are staying abreast with everything that's going on is utilizing the resources we have available to us. We are fortunate enough to have on board with our organization Patty Corkery, who is our general counsel, as well as all of the wonderful things she does for our Michigan Credit Union League. Everything that is coming up, I am doing my own research on through all of the different awesome resources that I have, whether it's the CDC, whether it's legal firms that are sending out information, but anything before I take action on, I'm having a conversation with Patty about, just to make sure that I am not missing anything, because there are so many nuances right now and things are changing so fast. Patty's hosting every Friday. She has legal counsel host a webinar for HR practitioners, and that's a great resource. But she always starts it off by saying, if you're listening to this recorded, please make sure you check the information because it could have changed by the time you've listened to it. So just making sure that we are doing our diligence to make sure that what we are actually putting into action is still relevant at the time is really important right now.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think another major change that a lot of organizations and even credit unions are seeing is moving their non-frontline staff. Obviously, our credit union staff is essential and people have to have access to the credit union still, but a lot of non-frontline staff are moving to remote work. It's something that a lot of organizations have never seen before. We were in the same boat. We had never on a large scale had a work from home initiative. So that is, a big change in itself. But another concern about that is staying connected with employees from an engagement point of view. Obviously, making sure they're doing the work that they need to be done, but there's also that isolation aspect of no longer having your coworker next to talk to and just kind of being locked in your house a little bit. What are some ways that are you staying connected with employees right now?
Another good question. We were kind of a little bit ahead of the game with this as an organization, because while we hadn't practiced remote work, we were getting ready to roll it out. So we had some of the infrastructure in place, had really neat tools like Microsoft Teams to utilize, and then there's of course Zoom and things like that. However, as of right now, we didn't plan on all of our employees being at home. And so I think it's important to approach communication at different touch points, basically. So number one, I think it's really important for employees to see leadership. So whether that's the CEO, whether that's HR leadership, sending out company-wide messages. You could do those by pre-recorded videos, or our CEO is doing something really cool. He's actually hosting a weekly all-staff, basically Microsoft Teams video chat, and each leadership is coming up, they're saying something, and then he's actually opening it up for all team members to ask questions. So making sure that they're seeing your leadership is really important, because it's going to provide that level of reassurance and continuity that leadership is on top of things and that they do care and they're engaged. Secondly, I think it's really important that people are focused on communicating with your direct reports. So you could have 5 direct reports, you could have 20 direct reports. Each one of those people, just like in normal employee management, is going to need different communication right now. I have 2 people that report to me. One of them is completely fine just communicating through Microsoft Teams chat. The other one is more visual and wants to be able to see and talk through ideas with me. And so, and I think that's a skill set for any good manager, is to be able to manage your employees as they need managed. And so just like you would do that if you were in the office, make sure as a manager you're taking the time to figure out what works for your employees, not just works for you, and then practice that to help them through this. You're going to have some employees that are fine through this and never have any worries. And then you're going to have employees who may have high anxiety and high stress levels, and maybe going, their husband may have been laid off, or their child may be sick. And so other things that add to their worry right now. And so being sure of that. And then I think the other thing about communication and staying in touch is to make sure that it's not just all business focused, because obviously we're all here for a reason and it's business. However, we're all people and we shouldn't be forgetting that human side. Our team's created on Microsoft Teams. It's a additional team that is an option on there, and it's called the Culture Club, which is cheesy as it may sound. That's kind of the intent, is to bring cheesiness to the workplace, because we all need to have some levity. And they're hosting things like water cooler chats at specific times of the day, just for people to check in with each other and have conversations about the weather, about their kids, about what they're doing to stay physically active while at home. And then we're going to do games through that. And so whereas you can't have that physical interaction, you can find ways to have that social side, make some stress relieving activities. So this Friday for us is going to be Trivia Friday, and at noon there's going to be different trivia facts that are set out there, and we'll work at getting prizes and stuff like that to people. So just making sure and approach it from a holistic and not just, you know, a one and done type concept is really important.
Yeah, great points. And I would recommend as well, like from talking with my colleagues as well, like I know, Amanda, you're in the same boat. You're in a house of all boys now. So my colleague Laura is the same way, and she wasn't feeling well. So she isolated herself, and being locked up, you know, we were sending out messages saying, hey, how are you doing? You know, just to have a different voice, if that needs to be webcam or not, you know, getting, you know, I'm used to being able to talk to my colleagues every day. So checking in on those different people, just like I would normally, but virtually as well. So I definitely recommend that for your staff.
Absolutely.
Amanda, I know that you said that we were kind of ahead of the ball because we were going remotely, having, you know, staff start to work remotely on Mondays. What was some of the work maybe that you would suggest and places to start if credit unions are wanting to move to this? Where are some good topics, or where they can start for research on how to do that?
You know, and I was so thankful because we already had our policy written and it was already in place because, and it's, you know, I pride myself on being an HR person who operates in the gray. So much of what we do can be black and white. And right now during this time period, this is a great time period, and you're having to bend policies, you're having to rewrite them to make them fit. And I would definitely, you know, there's so much being thrown at us right now and so many curveballs. But if you don't have a policy in place for remote work, work on getting one in place. That's probably most important. And then number two, partner with your IT team. There are so many tools out there. I know I've already probably over-referenced Microsoft Teams, but for us, I just think it's been the most amazing tool. It's I'm barely using my cell phone anymore because being able to do the audio calls through Microsoft Teams, and it's just made life so much easier. So I think those are the really, really important things. There's always the things that need done physically in the office, and you know, we do have team members in the office right now, as well as I know so many of the credit unions have their frontline people, and making sure that they have what they need. But definitely you have to have a strong policy in place and make sure that your employees are aware of what that policy is, knowing that right now things are kind of crazy, and that policy may change if you ever go back. Well, when we go back, not ever, when we go back to in office and in credit unions, you know, you may have to rewrite that policy, but definitely make sure you have something in place so that people know what expectations are. And like for us, there's a company directive that our CEO wants daily report outs. So whether that's an email to your boss or a visual, I think each company needs to make sure and identify how they're keeping track of what work is being done and the priorities that are happening.
Perfect, thank you. And again, I want to remind everyone of the chat feature if you have questions on work from home policies, anything like that, or how to get that initiative going, or anything else that you guys are struggling with, please use that chat feature, and Isaac will address those as they come. Amanda, so we've been kind of talking about, you know, how you're assisting from work from home, but what other ways are you assisting employees, you know, during this, you know, trying time?
You know, that's again, you've got really good questions right now. And you know, so much of HR, you can get into basically a groove of what your year looks like, and you know what to anticipate. Sure, you have your employee concerns that always come at you, but you're pretty good at dealing with those because you've been doing the job. And now we are just having curveballs thrown at us left, right, and center that we have never seen before. And I refer to it really as right now we are focused on blocking and tackling. And so those normal things that an HR department would have been focused on right now are definitely pushed to the side. And that's one of the things that our organization has made a focus on, is making sure that the employees are taken care of. Because really at the end of the day, that's what, sure, you know, payroll and benefits right up there with making sure employees are taken care of, but we need to make sure you guys have what you need to do your jobs. And so to do that, you really need to be on top of the legislation. We already kind of addressed that earlier, but there are so many resources out there within that legislation that could be assisting employees right now, whether they've got a loss of income in their family. You know, one of the neat things that's out there with the new CARES Act is how it's loosened up the ability to take funds out of people's 401ks. And that's usually something that's very reserved and really restricted. And that's income that people may need right now if they're faced with a loss of income or medical bills or things like that. And so for us, it's really staying focused on what is changing and how can those changes impact our employees, and how do we make sure and communicate to those employees what's going on. So it's really, I think the best way to describe it is looking at it more of the blocking and tackling right now of HR, knowing that you need to make sure everything that has to run has to get done, but focusing on those employee needs. And even just before we got on this call, I had 2 or 3 employees with things that I hadn't been addressed yet popping up, and now they're in my inbox. And we've got people who don't have childcare, and how are you going to make sure that they're receiving their pay? So it's really utilizing those tools. And like I mentioned before, you know, we're lucky, we've got every Friday there's HR calls for the state of Michigan. Anyone else who would like to attend to hear what those changes are going on and how that's happened, but definitely then getting it rolled out to the team members so that they know what resources are available to them.
Perfect, thank you. Another big thing that we were kind of talking about the other day is like you're tackling those sort of things that are coming at you as they come, but what other things should employers be thinking about that they may not be thinking about at this time, you know, with all the day-to-day changes that are coming up?
I think one of the important things, and my team has given this a lot of thought, because we're very task focused right now, because you complete one thing, you're moving on to the next, and then you're moving on to the next. Whereas, you know, HR, at least in my department, we're very focused on routine, and we have projects that happen every single time. Every January we're working on this, every February we're working on this. And so now we're more focused on that blocking and tackling piece. And I really think it's important that when we do that, we're making sure that the employee comes first. And here we are, we're sitting on, you know, video chat, talking to each other. That employee interaction is really, really important. And so supervisors, and not to bring too much personal into it, but my husband works in automotive, and they've got a lot of stuff that they're dealing with right now. And they are literally back-to-back meetings. Every single hour they're in a meeting. And I think what happens when you're focused like that is you tend to forget that it's also a person on the other side of that phone or the video chat, and that they may have personal needs going on. And I think organizations need to make sure and make it a focus to let their team members know that they still care. They're worried about their physical, mental well-being, their family's well-being. And then I also need to think that organizations really need to focus and make it known that our employees shouldn't be working 15, 16 hours a day sitting in their home office. And it can be really difficult to kind of make that break between work-life balance right now. And I think it's really important that employers set lines and expectations. And I think our CEO did a nice job yesterday of addressing that on our weekly staff call, where he's telling everyone when he starts the calls off, it's families and your personal life first right now, and then we will make sure and get the work done. But making sure it's clear to people that they need to take breaks. It's important to get up and stretch, whether you're, you know, the front line in the credit union, sitting there and servicing the customers. Make sure you're taking your breaks on a regular basis. And then when you're sitting in, you know, here I am in a guest bedroom right here in my house, I could sit here for 8 hours straight and not leave. Well, take advantage. Get up and have lunch with your family. Take a walk. And employers make sure and take time and emphasize that mental well-being is really important right now as well.
It's funny as you saying that, like getting up from your office, because I'm used to getting a lot more steps in the day that I'm not getting in anymore. My husband suggested that I do lunges when I go to get water and back, you know, just changing, you know, your routine up a little bit than sitting in your desk all day. So
absolutely.
So whether you're, you know, just an employee like myself, or, you know, or a head of an organization, CEO of a credit union, a lot of people are thinking about how long is this going to last. And really, you know, when you are, you know, the CEO of an organization, and even not just being a part of the organization, is what is this going to mean for the financial future for credit unions? So I'm going to kind of shift things over to Eric for a little bit. Eric, I know that you are not a psychic and you can't tell us. I wish you could tell us how long this is going to last. Maybe that would be over tomorrow, but you could definitely help with that other part of, you know, how was this, you know, how should credit unions be thinking about how this is going to affect their financial future, and kind of what they can do about that.
Well, sure. Thanks, Emily. And yep, my standing joke that I use in planning sessions is, yeah, my crystal ball is no better than your crystal ball. So yeah, I wish I had a little more insight, but I will give you a couple places where you can potentially go to get some of that insight. I'm not an economist. I was, as you mentioned, a CFO for credit unions for a number of years. And for me, what this really reminds me of is 2008 and 2009, because that was, it's become known as the Great Recession, but we had an unprecedented event then. And what became very popular back then was a book called The Black Swan. And the subtitle of that book is The Impact of the Highly Improbable. And that's what we're facing now, the highly improbable. Nobody saw this coming, and certainly not the drastic economic shutdown that's been a result of what we've experienced. So from that standpoint, there are a couple things we can look at. And before I jump into some of the real financial minutia, one of the things I want to say, I have talked to some boards over the last few weeks. I work with them on our CEO review product, and both, with the boards and the CEOs, Amanda talked about a lot of things that credit unions have in place, ways to do remote work, communicate with the employees directly, remotely. Not all boards have that in place for credit unions. And I've had a couple credit unions that, I've had things scheduled and they said, you know what, we've put everything on hold. And I understand that, hearing how they're drinking from the fire hose operationally, but the board's role is governance of the credit union, and you can postpone some things, but you can't put everything on hold. And the issue, my colleague Brandy Stankovic and I were doing a video yesterday, and we're talking about this. A lot of credit unions, the plans is, well, we're going to defer this, or we're going to push it out. But there's only so much that you can push out. There's only going to be so much capacity in the second half of the year, or whenever it is we return to normal. So we're trying to encourage people, think about at least now what you can, how you can meet as a board, even if somebody can figure out how to set up the Zoom or the GoToMeeting or whatever for the board. A lot of boards are used to meeting in person. I understand you don't have that capability, but you'll figure it out. And one of the questions I get asked, going back to your point, is, well, when is this going to end? What is the economic impact going to be? And, question number one, I can't answer that. I can't say when it's going to end. But in terms of what the economic impact may be, we do have a little bit of a precedent going back to 08 and 09. The credit unions as an industry, starting in the period of early 2007 till the end of 2009, saw some fairly drastic financial changes. Back in the beginning of 2007, delinquency for credit unions was about 50 basis points. By the end of 2009, that had gone up to almost 2% or 200 basis points. So you saw delinquency more than triple in a 2-year period. Return on assets, which is the standard measure for profitability for credit unions, that was about 75 basis points in the beginning of 2007. By the end of 2009, that had dropped to 25 basis points. So those are some historical precedents for what we might be looking at. And I don't want to, kind of lead with doom and gloom, but if you're a credit union saying, how could this potentially impact me? I would start there. Look at that historical precedent. Now, the interesting thing about this, and what makes it a little more challenging, is back in 08 and 09, it was kind of a slow burn to get there. Housing values started dropping. You saw members start to literally walk away from their mortgage loans, which had never been seen before, but it was a more gradual process. Here we had the economy shut down in a matter of a week or two. And the interesting thing about this is there used to be the term recession proof. And some of the industries that were thought to be quote unquote recession proof were education and healthcare. Well, those are obviously the ones that are almost being hit the hardest right now. So it is going to look different. And in terms of a leading indicator, unemployment is really going to be the thing that determines, how you do from an economic perspective in your credit union. There's a very tight correlation over the years between the unemployment rate and things like loan delinquency at credit unions. So when you see something today where over 6 million people, applied for jobless claims, that's telling you that unemployment's going to really spike pretty quickly and it's going to go pretty high. So the expectation is going to be that your loan delinquency and charge-offs may spike pretty quickly and pretty high. So there is some precedent to look at there. The other thing that's available, CUNA put out last week an economic forecast. Now, again, they had to make a lot of assumptions for that forecast, but just like we saw in 08 and 09, they're anticipating that return on assets is going to go down, delinquency and charge-offs are going to go up. And as an organization, one of the things you want to think about is if you're doing some things now that are going to have that economic impact, like waiving fees for members, extending loan terms, you really need to start thinking about that impact. And it can be an informal analysis, kind of a back of the envelope, whatever, but really it's not too early to start thinking about what could happen to us as an organization. And especially if your capital is tight and you know it's going to be a capital hit and you're trying to figure out how much, you can start doing that kind of calculation right now.
Okay, well, thank you. Are there any other, I know that you mentioned a couple resources of them to help with that planning. Is there any other areas that or tools that you recommend for credit unions to help with that future planning?
Well, a lot of credit unions now, every credit union is required to do an asset liability management program, which includes a shock test. But those shocks tend to be along the lines of just interest rate movements. And obviously there are, rates are very low right now with the cuts that have been made, but ALM is not going to capture all of it, but it's a good starting point. And if you take an ALM shock analysis and layer some things on, like what are you expecting to see with fee revenue? What are you expecting to see with increased loan charge-offs? And kind of add those on to some of your existing models. Some credit unions have fairly sophisticated budgeting and forecasting capabilities. They have a tool they can update. For other credit unions, it's going to be a more manual process where they might start with their existing ALM and then add those additional shocks or stresses that they expect to see in the organization.
Awesome, thank you, Eric. So what positive change, I'm going to do this for the question for both of you, and then we'll switch over to some Q&As because we have lots of questions coming in, Isaac says. So what kind of positive changes have you seen come out of this, shock, that we weren't expecting a few weeks ago?
I'll start and then I'll let Amanda jump in. The positive, and we experienced this at my credit in 08 and 09. It was referred to back then as the flight to safety. If people are pulling money out of the markets, that money's got to go somewhere, and a lot of people are moving it to the safety of their credit union. They're more comfortable with that insured deposit as opposed to money in the stock market. So that's the good news. The only thing for credit unions in a rate environment like this is you've got to make sure that you are looking at your pricing. So if you're bringing in deposits, that's great, but make sure you're not paying out more on those deposits that you're earning from your investment portfolio. Your investment yields are going down, so there may be a limit on what you can offer your members in terms of rates on those deposits coming in. So the good news is you should expect to see some deposit increases. Just make sure you're priced appropriately so that you can make sure they're profitable deposits coming in.
Thank you. How about you, Amanda?
Some positives. I think for me, from an HR standpoint and from what I've seen happening, one of the benefits, and this may be obvious, but this ability that all of these companies across our nation have made remote work. And you think about the concept of remote work, and some organizations have jumped on that train a long time ago and made it so easy for their employees, whereas other organizations have been resistant to it. And you've got 3 generations in the workforce. You've got the boomers, you've got the Gen X's like me, and you've got millennials right now who are crazy computer savvy. And it's neat to see organizations make it happen and make it work. And not just from the remote work standpoint, but to be able to run their operations and keep things going. And I think one of the great benefits is going to be when our world does return to normal and we're all back going into work, that organizations will open up remote work for employees, which will then, of course, benefit. I've always been a pro remote work person, you know, making sure the operations are running as they should be. However, I think it offers so much for work-life balance. And I think it's kind of pushed us out of our comfort zone to make it almost, well, the norm now. So it'll be nice to see when we return that hopefully companies continue with some form of remote work to benefit their employees' work-life balance.
Awesome. Thank you very much for both of you for answering those questions. So we're going to move on to the Q&A portion. So again, if you have questions that you want to be answered, please use the chat. Isaac is sending me some of those in Teams. Amanda has sent me, or has plugged that a couple of times here. So I'm going to, excuse me while I look at my other screen to read these. But one question we got is, how does the panel see affecting the hiring and unemployment over the next few months as this crisis finishes? Or, you know, will it be challenging to find and hire talent the next 6 months after things get back to normal?
Well, I'll take that one. I referenced unemployment earlier. I think it will be an opportunity for credit unions because there are going to be a lot of people looking for work, and there's going to be some really good talent out there. And I'll just share a quick anecdotal story. We had resisted going to the supermarket, but my wife had to make the trip to Myers yesterday, and she was checking out, and she didn't recognize the gentleman who was ringing her up. And she said, "Oh, are you new?" And he said, "Yeah, I got laid off from a hotel in Detroit last week, and I needed to do something to make a little bit of money. And the supermarkets are hiring, and they've got a huge talent pool that they can hire from right now." And I think credit unions will have that same opportunity whenever, you know, the new normal kicks in.
Amanda, anything you want to hire or to add to that, to hire, to add to that at all, or do you think Eric covered that?
No, I think he covered it.
Okay. This question is for Amanda, actually. So it says, thanks for talking about the different communication styles for employees that we're handling right now. How do you recommend communicating to your mid-level managers?
I like that idea. That's interesting. And I think so often there are so many times where people get promoted and they don't have the managerial skills to manage people, and they're the subject matter expert in whatever discipline they work in, but when it comes to management skills, they've never had to do it before. And you know, for me, and that's one way that an HR department can really become valuable right now, and is getting that message out to those managers who they're struggling to keep their operations running as well as manage their people. And you could do a lot of different things. You could actually host a training where you have a discussion and you set up a video chat just like we're doing right now. And you could serve up questions to have maybe one of your other HR people ask you so that you can walk the managers through it. Email, you know, everybody gets a lot of email, but email tips can be really helpful, and maybe laying it out via an email to just explain that, you know, there are many different people in the world and everybody has different needs right now, and making sure that you're managing to them. The Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM, if you are not a member of, really good resource, and they have a lot of, I guess, for lack of a better word, canned tools about stuff like that that you could supply to your managers as well. But I think it's what best works for your managers, but making sure that they have the information, and whether that's a video chat, whether it's an email, whether it's a pre-recorded training, to make them aware, because I think it can be something that's forgotten very easily.
Awesome, thank you very much. Eric, next one is for you. It says, do you see long-term, or did you see the long-term impacts of 2008 recession that might apply here? It says, for example, what do you think of ramifications will be in 2022 that will, we can start anticipating, can't get that out now. You know, you talked about the basis points. Are there other things like that?
Yeah, and this is one that had real long-term implications, because back in 2008, 2009, interest rates had dropped, you know, as they have now. And what everybody assumed was, oh, rates are going to go back up fairly quickly. And what they did is they held off making long-term investments. They left money in cash, and they ended up foregoing a lot of interest income because everybody was sure, oh, rates are going to go up. Well, they did go up, but it took about 10 years. And so they really left a lot of money on the table. So if you're thinking that, oh yeah, when we start to return to normal, rates are going to pop up again, I wouldn't make that assumption. I would figure out, and there's different ways you can do it. You can ladder investments and ways to address it, but I wouldn't keep all my money short term in the assumption that rates are going to pop back up.
Thank you. In this question, more towards Amanda, I would say, if staff members are at home and don't have access to company email, how do you suggest leadership folks, message to them? Do CEO messages? Do you want to use personal emails? What would you suggest for that?
Again, I think this goes, I would always advise to not put stuff into team member personal emails. Again, that's going back to how we used to do things, just as out of a respect for team members. But unprecedented territory, we've got to use the resources and tools we have available to us. If they don't have company email, then I would say using personal email is probably the best venue. Snail mail doesn't really seem like a good option. That just seems like another way to be, having our postal workers inundated with work that they don't need to be doing. So company email would definitely be a good option. And if they have a website as well, the credit union website, they could create potentially a staff-only landing page to where videos could be posted, and staff know maybe every Monday, go check for the new video message from your CEO. And that might be another option that would avoid the company email, but you have to get that message out to them about needing to check it. So.
Okay, thank you. Another one for Amanda. It says, we have some employees who have been underperforming and who we've been moving out of their roles. What recommendations are there for this, and how does this affect, how does this affect how we proceed? So with regular layoffs and now people, they're underperforming and they are no longer a fit for the credit union.
Yes, and it's amazing how when we're under this, we so care more about the human side of people, which is one of the good things that have happened right now. And this is a difficult situation when you have an underperforming employee, and now if that person potentially is still coming in and working in the credit union, there's a high level of trust that you have in them because you've got less people, less supervision. And then if it's somebody who is working at home, really same story, less supervision, more trust required. I think you really need to continue the documentation, whatever you are doing to do that. One of the tools that we have in our environment is we use Performance Pro, which is an HR performance solutions tool. And that's nice because the documentation is right in there. All the forms are there for you to utilize. But I don't think you stop the process. If you stop the process, then that's definitely sending the wrong message to the person. And at the end of the day, if they're headed down that path where they're not going to be changing their behaviors, and you stop that documentation, you're reinforcing that poor behavior on that individual. So I would continue. If you get to the point where there's no coming back and you've already tried the performance improvement plan and that hasn't really, resolved the situation with the team member, it's a tough decision of letting someone go during this time that you don't really want to be faced with if you don't have to be. But I think that needs to be a discussion amongst the leadership, the manager, as well as even involving top level CEOs, making sure that we're looking at the human side and, can we continue down that performance improvement path and extend that, or is it truly time to part ways? And as difficult as this may be to hear or say or absorb, there is a lot of opportunity out there right now for the unemployment and the additional payments that are being made. So if you are unfortunately in a position where you do have to lose your job right now, that extra cushion is there if somebody is put into that position.
Perfect, thank you. And Eric, this one might tie, it's opposite of what we just asked you, Amanda, but are credit unions hiring at this time? I know you're talking to a lot of CEOs and boards. Are they still hiring during this crisis that we're having?
Yeah, they are. And actually, we have a partner, we partner, we have a product called CUSG Executive Search, and we partner with the ANGOT search group, and I'm talking to them weekly. And they had done a lot of remote hiring prior to this, so they have the things set up. So yeah, job searches are continuing to go on. Credit unions are continuing to hire, and in some cases it may be even more critical now than it was before to fill some of these positions. So yes.
Perfect, thank you. Another question for you, Eric, is do you have any suggestions on how mid-level managers should be reporting to the C-suite in this different situation? In the second part of that, are things that the C-suite are likely, sorry, I lost track. Are there any particularly different interests now versus 2 months ago?
Well, here's what I'd say, and this is where mid-manager levels can really add some value and what CEOs and C-suites should be listening for. Back in 2008, 2009, there were a lot of things that were considered conventional wisdom. For instance, the conventional wisdom was members will always pay their mortgage first. Obviously, that stopped happening, to the point where credit unions who'd never seen a foreclosure before had members walking in, handing them the keys to the house going, I'm underwater, here, you can have the house. Now, the people that are going to hear about that first are the collections people. And it may be anecdotal at first, but once you have numerous anecdotal things, they tend to turn into a trend. So you need to be listening for those new trends. We don't know what the new normal is going to be, but it will create a different environment than we worked in before. So the employees that are closest, to the members really are going to hear those things first. If they hear about that, they need to be running that up the chain. And if you're a CEO or senior management, you need to be asking your employees, what are those things we're hearing? What do we need to be aware of? How can we help? What are our members experiencing? What do we need to be aware of as an organization?
Perfect, thank you. It's a great point. Amanda, can you share your thoughts on how to help employees that do catch COVID-19, or if they're family members that contract the virus during this time?
Yeah, we've talked this through with my team, and we do have a policy in place for us and how we will handle it as an organization. But how we got to that policy, one of the first places I went is the CDC website. The CDC website, the one specifically geared for employers, and I don't know the actual address off the top of my head, but it's CDC for employers, has unbelievable checklists, and it's basically a step-by-step of what you as an employer can and should be doing to assist your team members in this time. Of course, it's going to vary per organization and the capability that they have, whether financially to help that person out or not. But our rule of thumb and our kind of mantra through all of this is compassion and common sense. And not for, of course, right up front is that human element with the compassion, but right behind that is the common sense and thinking about the situation practically and what can be done. But definitely checking out that CDC website and figuring out then on top of that the government resources that are available, because there's so many things out there right now. I referenced earlier the loosening of the 401k access, and then in addition, there is the pay that's being offered through the different acts that are out there right now. But my first stop would definitely be the CDC website.
Perfect, thank you very much. And again, thank you everyone for sending these amazing questions to us. Keep sending them over. I've got a few more that I'm going to ask here. If we can't get to all of them, we will definitely follow up afterwards. We are recording this session too, so we can send out a link to the recording that you can rewatch or share with others within your organization. One question that we have here is, Eric, what should boards be doing to support the CEO at this time?
That's a great question, and that came up in the video I filmed with my colleague Brandy yesterday. Is really boards should be asking the CEOs, what can I do to help? What is it you need from us as a board? The boards, they need to be governing, and in regular times, they knew what that meant. They had a routine. Now they're actually looking to the CEO and his or her management team for guidance. As opposed to the board saying, okay, you need to do this, it's more the board saying, how can we help support the organization? What do you need? And it may be, a CEO wants to do a fee waiver. He's not going to wait for the next board meeting. He may call up the board chair and say, we're going to waive fees, and this is probably the impact it's going to have. And so boards are really, they need to either delegate and say, yep, we're going to give the chair the authority to authorize that, or we'll do a quick phone meeting if there's something that needs a board vote. But how can the board support this, the management team right now, when the management team's kind of drinking from the fire hose? So that's really, and the other thing, I've had some boards ask me, well, Eric, what's your opinion? And again, I'm glad to give my opinion. Anything to help, that's one of the reasons we're here, as CUSG and as a subsidiary of the league, we're here to help. So, I've told I've put my email and my phone number out there in a number of different channels. But, if you're a board member and you have questions like, oh, the CEO is so busy, I don't want to bother him, feel free to reach out. I'd be glad to, help with some of those things too. I did have a credit union board ask me, well, what should we do? We put a budget together and it's no good. We know it's no good. And, my advice was, well, yeah, you're right. It's not going to be any good, but it's a little too early to, recast the budget or do a reforecast. But here's the things you need to think about. And I went through, Linda, you're going to waive fees. You're going to have loan delinquencies. Your rates are going to fall on your investments. So just start thinking about the impact. And then we'll get to the point where you can either do a new forecast or, adjust your budget, however you want to handle it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And I'm saying Eric is offering himself as a resource. And I think Amanda and myself are as well. Being a part of the QSO, we have lots of different resources that if you are struggling with, reach out to one of us and we will try to help or point you into a direction that can help as well. So thank you for reminding me of that, Eric. And we'll put up emails as well again at the end. They were there at the beginning, but in case anyone missed that, we will share those again. Can the panel tell us what they think the best thing they can do for their members at the moment is? I don't know if that may more lean towards you, Eric, or
Eric.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, figure out where your membership needs the support. One of the things, I raised the issue earlier of education and healthcare. In the last recession, those areas weren't as impacted. But if you've got a field of membership that's education-based, that is, the bars and restaurants based, that is first responder based, just think about what they're going through, the things they may need to have, provided for them. So think about what's unique about your membership, what unique needs they may have during this time, and then how can you accommodate those things, whether it's by a product. I know a lot of credit unions are rolling out, the zero-term or near zero-term short-term loans. They're putting those fee waivers out there, but what is it that your specific membership really needs? What could benefit them? I know a lot of credit unions made some assumptions right out of the gate, but now's the time where maybe you try and start getting some feedback and say, are we really addressing all our member needs right now?
And that may change as everything changes as well. So I think being able to be agile and maybe continuing to look at that every few weeks, and is there anything else that needs have changed at all? So be agile with those offerings too.
Yeah, in 2008, 2009, we didn't have the social media channels for the immediate feedback like a lot of credit unions have now. If you're monitoring social media, you can probably figure out fairly quickly in a fairly small sample what's important to your members right now.
Perfect. Eric, this one is for you as well. It says, what do you think the recovery timeline looks like? I know that might be a crystal ball type answer, but how do you anticipate this will affect HR and the credit union as a whole?
Yeah, this one does require the crystal ball. This is one where I'm not necessarily going to use 2008, 2009 as a proxy. There the period was a little over 2 years, but this is different because it's happened so quickly. The unemployment numbers have hit so quickly. When this first started, everybody thought, okay, we're going to stay in our house for 2 weeks and then it's going to be business as normal. Yeah, that didn't happen. I don't think anybody's convinced the country's going to magically open up on April 30th. So the duration of this shutdown will determine how long it'll take to recover. but I can't tell you it's going to be a 1-for-1 or anything. You know, it's going to be a matter of what gets impacted. And if you've seen some of the graphs out there, they start showing the impact of small business after 2 weeks, a month. And the longer you go, the fewer businesses that have the cash flow to hold on. So especially those credit unions that make, the small business loans, can make small business loans, or even have been thinking about doing it. It's not just the individual members, it's going to be the businesses, especially the small businesses that just aren't equipped to go an extended period of time in this environment. So, but yeah, I can't, once we know when business maybe starts to open up, we might get a little better idea than how long it'll take to recover. But yeah, my crystal ball is not that good.
So a little fuzzy. Amanda, that might be, part of that question might be good for you as well, is how do you think that's going to affect HR for organizations, throughout this?
The long-term impact.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're working on as an organization is this concept of, we're basically calling it company preparedness. And it's kind of long-term planning. And I think Eric made a great point. We all went into this 2 weeks at home and then we'll be back to normal, and now we're not. And as an organization, that's one of the things we're looking at right now, is preparing for what happens if we do have team members who are sick or have a person in their family who is sick. And as an organization, you really need to look and you need to make those plans, number one, internally, not just for the team member and making sure that you can take care of them, but taking care of the organization and making sure you have backups there. And then as we look at coming back and the long-term effect, and it was addressed earlier, but this whole concept of what is the job market going to look like is incredibly, it's going to be very different. We're going to be coming from low unemployment for months upon months upon months, where you couldn't find the right people in the market, where I think we're going to be inundated to where we will have a lot of people in the job market, and hopefully organizations will have their choice of people. So I think there's a lot of unknowns, and I think one of the things that I've been proud of with our organization is our ability to be flexible and to pivot, and knowing that we really need to be taking some of the time you have right now to prepare and think, bring your leaders together in a room and spend some time, not just dealing with the issues that are in front of you, but what does it look like in 6 months from now? Because I think when we all sat down and, you used individuals like Eric to put together those strategic plans have gone out the window. And so it's definitely taking that time to put some thought into what it's going to look like in a few months.
Perfect, thank you. And I know that we've touched on this a little bit, but it got asked again. It says, can we talk a bit more about how teams are staying connected and productive during this time? Interested in any thoughts that teams that aren't used to working remotely, what they can do a little bit differently.
I'll use my team as an example. My HR team, even though our company was getting set to go remote, we were going to be one of the teams that wasn't really going to be taking advantage of that. And so we've kind of had to pivot and get used to this. And we are just a 3-person team, but we've kind of kept things normal. As crazy as that sounds, we have a weekly team meeting, and we've stuck with that weekly team meeting. That's been really important for us. But on the flip side of that, we've leveraged a lot of technology to keep us together. And I keep harping on Microsoft Teams, but I think it's a great tool, and it's available if you're using Outlook or any of the Microsoft products. But there are other things out there, such as Skype, that offer similar things, SharePoint, that allow you to share documents. And so one of the additional things we've done as a team is we have a document, and it's basically got all of our priorities. They're categorized to high, medium, and low, who's assigned to them, if there's a necessary date for completion. And that's a document that at any point, if my supervisor needs to know what's going on, I just take that document and I send it to her, so she's in the know. So then she's able to communicate up the chain and so forth. But that's been invaluable to us because it's real time. And then really finding some type of source that offers the chat function, because here we are, and I can be working on a document, and I've got my monitor going here, I've got my cell phone where I see text messages coming in and all of that, but having that ability to message multiple team members at the same time and answer questions has been really invaluable for me. So I really think it's about keeping your schedule, making sure that people know what hours they're expected to work, and what you expect of them, as well as utilizing that technology and making sure that you're putting those regular checkpoints in place and truly holding people accountable. And even if you've got that performer who is that self-starter, doesn't need any help from you, they still need to understand that they need to communicate to you what's going on. So those daily checkpoints, whether it's the email at the end of the day, the team meeting to start the day, of where is that accountability?
That's a great point. And to go with that Teams, I kind of adopted it right away when we did put it in as an organization. Isaac was one of the ones that didn't. So and he is my manager actually. So we communicate very much on a daily basis, but not being able to walk to each other's desks. We've been communicating a lot more with that, and we've even implemented a second team meeting, a much shorter one, but we always had a standing weekly meeting. We've changed that day a little bit, so we have one Tuesday and Thursday now, so that we are still meeting as a team. So even adding those in as well, like we have a very highly communicative team, but now we're meeting even a little bit more because we can't just walk to each other's desks and talk to each other. I'm sure, Eric, you're doing something very similar. You're used to communicating more just because Brandy's not in the same location as you.
Right. I've had a boss who's been remote, but now we're all using Teams for our team meeting. And the nice thing, where I see the benefit of Teams is the collaboration. Yes, email still works, texting, but when you need feedback from a group in real time, that's where this method comes into play, where you can talk something out as a group. So yeah, that's definitely the benefit I see of it.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for your time and information today. We definitely appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. We will be sending a link to the recorded webinar, as well as a list of free, if not dramatically reduced, solutions to help provide our credit unions help during this time. So watch for that email. Isaac, if you can share out that screen again with contact information, but maybe we'll put that in the email too. But again, thank you for everyone joining us. We definitely sympathize with you. We're going to get through this as a community. Thank you for sharing that up, Isaac. Definitely, it's going to be a community that gets us through this time, and we sympathize if anyone that or yourselves gets the virus. So everyone stay healthy and stay safe out there, and we will talk with you soon. Again, if we didn't answer your question today, we'll definitely get to it in an email reply to you. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.